Good morning, everyone. So it's a great honor, actually, for me to do this introduction as the student of Carol and Gary. So many of you were present at the 2018 LARC, and as well as 2022 LARC at the University of Chicago. I certainly remember that one. After these two successful conferences, ETS has approached the LARC Executive Committee about a permanent sponsorship of one of the plenaries. So that was the first discussion around that. In the multiple discussions that ensued, an additional distinction arose to name the plenary as an award in honor of two prominent scholars in our field, Chapelle and Gary Ockey. Indeed, they were the driving force and the founder of the LARC in 2016. The motivation for LARC were to provide an accessible and affordable venue for people interested in language assessment in North American context, and to share their work in the years when LTRC is located outside of the region, and to provide graduate students with an opportunity to network with academics and professionals working in language assessment industry and academia, to provide a venue for sharing research and teaching insights for individuals from US higher education contexts and applied linguistics, and to promote effective, ethical language assessment research and practices in North American context and the world more broadly. Traditionally, such honors come about after an individual is no longer active in their field. So this is a historic moment, a very unique moment. It is a testament to Gary and Carol's significant and long-term contributions to the field of language assessment that we chose to honor them now. Not only because of their work, but also because of the culture of exceptionally high ethical standards they have established at Iowa State, carried out by their many graduate students. It is my belief that these standards are more critical than ever in the present day. In any case, more conversations took place, perhaps very appropriate for a language-related award. I am very happy to be able to welcome you to the official announcement of the Ockey and Chapelle TOEFL Language Assessment Research Award. In the future, the awardee of this award will give a plenary at the Language Assessment Research Conference. I want to point out that there are three distinct events happening today. That is kind of confusion I have to make sure this is very clear. So the first thing, we are announcing of the award itself. The inaugural sponsored plenary, and perhaps most meaningfully, the Carol, Ockey and Chapelle will be giving the plenary talk themselves, which is again very unique. Now I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Serim O, a research scientist at ETS, who will present the award and introduce the plenary.
Thank you, Ahmed. It's my honor to represent ETS to introduce Gary and Carol in the Ockey and Chapelle TOEFL Language Assessment Research Award. As Ahmed mentioned, Drs. Gary Ockey and Carol Chapelle are the co-founders of LARC, and as you all know, esteemed scholars in the field of language assessment, and have had such a substantial impact on language assessment in the US and around the world. And to honor their legacy and commitment to advancing language assessment research, the TOEFL program at ETS has named this award in tribute to Dr. Ockey and Dr. Chapelle. ETS is especially grateful for their contributions to validation research for our testing programs. Carol was instrumental in the development of the validity argument for the TOEFL IBT test, and we're also grateful for Gary's work at ETS on the use of accents in listening assessment and his work on assessing interaction in virtual environments. Now, on a personal note, I attended Carol's talk at a conference in Hawaii in 2006 when I was an MA student attending my first academic conference. And I clearly remember how excited I was to see Carol in person after knowing her from her works. And Gary was my mentor for a year during his time at ETS and when I was an intern. And working with him and working on his projects was one of the key reasons why I thought that working for the industry and for ETS is something that I like to pursue when I graduate. So thank you to you both who had a huge impact not only on the field but on an individual student as well. So with that, I'd like to welcome Gary and Carol for their plenary talk.
Let me start by saying thank you so much to the Language Assessment Research Conference Group, the board who made this decision, and also to ETS for sponsoring us. We greatly appreciate it. And I also want to say I feel very honored to have my name next to Carol's on this, so thank you to Carol as well. As you can see, the title of our talk, Fairness, Humanism, and Ethics in Oral Communication Assessment Using Generative AI. Well, I'm going to start out by telling a story which is pretty common in my world. This is a story. This is my daughter, Chapelle, and last year she was in a play, a school play. The school play, some of you may be familiar with Newsies. Newsies is a story based on a true story that took place back in the late 1800s in New York City. There were some kids who were delivering papers, not getting paid very much. They were getting treated poorly, rough times back then. And one of them in that story, and it's also based on a character in life, they refer to as Crutchy. Well, my daughter played the part of Crutchy in the play. And I have to now fill in another little piece of background here. One time my daughter asked me, "Dad, after you die, what do you want to be remembered for?" But I didn't really have to think too long to say, I want to be remembered for somebody who tried hard to bring just a little bit more fairness to the world. My daughter was doing a first school project, and oh wow, this is cool. And as I watched that play, I sat right on the front row. And the whole time I'm watching my daughter play the role of the person who's into fairness. And this is the person who's named Crutchy because he's crippled, can't walk very well, but struggling and trying to do everything in life to be successful in making the world a little bit fairer, and especially in that context. And I was sitting there, my wife kept brushing the tears off of her eyes, and I was fighting to keep mine away. But I was thinking about the fact that Crutchy's my hero. I'm sure that's my daughter too. But Crutchy's my hero. I want to try to do the best I can to make the world a better place. In this talk, we're going to be talking about a little bit about making the world a better place. So just a quick overview. In part one, I'm going to, as I mentioned, introduce a few values in language assessment: fairness, humanism, and ethics. And then I'm going to take just a few minutes to show some examples about some of the work I've done and some of the work that we're doing currently at Iowa State, and talk about how we believe that these things are focusing on those important values in assessment. And then in part two, Carol is going to pick that up and continue talking about the large language models, generative AI, and their role in oral communication assessment. So you'll see I've written OC here for oral communication, but this applies to all aspects of language assessment. It's just that our examples are focusing on oral communication. So here's a definition of fairness. All test takers should have an appropriate and equitable opportunity to participate in an assessment activity and perform to the best of their abilities. I think this is a really good definition. And if you notice there, we talk about opportunity to participate and opportunity to demonstrate to the best of their abilities. And so obviously access is an important part of fairness, which absolutely is true. But I want to say a little bit more about access because I want people to think deeply about these different values. So here's an example. Access and the use of remote AI. Does it increase fairness? If it increases fairness, then that would be a good thing. But the question is, does the use of remote AI lead to more access for certain groups or for everyone? We want it to be for everyone. So as you can see, my circle on the left, I've got kind of a dark green for people who have a lot of money, and then a light green for people who have less money. If we then use remote AI, so that would be historically before remote AI showed up. We add remote AI, where does the new access go? Well, it might help people who don't have any money a little bit. But if they don't have much money and they can't afford technology, they don't have access to internet, they don't have all those things, they're probably not going to be helped very much, and they're probably not going to get much more access than they had before. Zero is zero. And the people who have a lot of money, maybe they, or some money at least, maybe they now can go instead of a testing center, they can do things, and it helps their access more. But I don't think we've really considered access to everyone. And when we're thinking about fairness, we need to be thinking about everyone. As we were preparing this talk, Carol and I talked about what do we mean by humanistic? And we looked through the literature. I think we found 5 or 6 references in language assessment to humanistic, and there was no real definition that was clear. So we came up with this one adapted from the Encyclopedia Britannica that we believe represents what we want it to mean. People are individual beings with self-worth and should be recognized and treated as such. So what does this mean a little bit further? Do not treat test takers like lab rats. Treat test takers as humans with feelings of self-worth. Use tests to provide test takers opportunities to demonstrate what they can do instead of punishments for what they cannot. When I give a test, whatever classes I'm teaching, whatever I'm doing, I say this is your opportunity to show yourself and whoever else that you can do this. It's opportunity. Yesterday we heard the plenary Yuko talked about, and it was great. She's talking about young learners. And the whole time I was saying to myself, absolutely true, that we should be treating them as humans and fairness and all these things. That's a way for all language assessment researchers. And I think she would agree with that our language assessment, our test takers is what I mean here. But everyone should be treated that way. Language tests must be ethical. What do we mean by ethical? This takes me back to a course I took from Anthony Kuhn roughly 20 years ago when I was a student at UCLA. I took this from one of the textbooks we read in that class. Using procedures that follow codified standards and rules governing professional practice. That's what we mean by ethics. Now, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand a few times here so you can get a little exercise. First question. How many of you know that the International Language Testing Association is the group that we consider our governing professional board or group? How many people know that? Keep your hand up if you knew that ILTA guidelines for practice were modified in 2024. Good. And approved as the membership with AI as the driving force for this revision. Good. The revisions minimally changed principles. In fact, I don't think they changed the principles at all, but they added context for AI. Keep your hand up if you knew all that. Okay, so I still see a few hands. Now I don't want you to keep your hand up because this might be a little more personal. How many of you have read the Code of Practice? Okay, so some of you have. How many of you are confident that you follow the Code of Practice, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a researcher, whether you're a testing company? I think it's important that we think about, are we ethical? Now, what you'll see in the talk is that fairness and ethics, they cross over a lot because the ethical principles established by our group, a lot of them relate to fairness. So when you say, well, isn't fairness kind of ethics? Yes, a lot of times they're almost the same thing. But I'm going to talk about them a little bit differently, even though they're very much the same thing. Let me just give you a few examples. Now, I wasn't involved at all in creating the ethics or updating the ethics, the professional standards here. So I just went through and I pulled out a few examples so we can see what do we mean in the AI world for being ethical. Information about the test for users and test takers should be transparent regarding the use of technology in test development, delivery, scoring, and administration. If you read that a little bit further, it talks about how, if you're giving a test, you should make sure everybody knows what the model is and what the scoring algorithm is. Well, we know that the testing companies are rarely giving out this information. I'm not saying that there's not a reason for that, but according to our code of practice, that's not ethical. Here's another example. Significant judgments about learners' achievement, particularly judgments about complex language constructs, should involve human judgment and not be based solely on automated methods. If you're basing it solely on automated methods, you're not ethical. Any actual or potential negative impacts of tests stem from known and controllable aspects of test design or use should be anticipated to the extent possible and addressed. Put in simpler terms, AI should not lead to poor language learning and teaching practices. If your AI and use of AI is leading to poor teaching practices, you're not ethical. And we know this picture here I'm showing with the drop something in the water, you see the paint go every direction because every time we give a test, we're having an impact on the way people are studying. If that's not the approach or the effect that is desirable in terms of what we believe is good teaching practice, you're not ethical. Well, let me give you a little example here of what we've been doing at Iowa State and talk about, are we being ethical? Are we doing what we should be doing? So I'm going to be talking about, very briefly, assessing oral communication with a human partner and spoken dialogue systems. And I'll talk about two versions of spoken dialogue systems. So the context, this is Iowa State University's English placement test, which is used to determine how much English support students need after entering the university. Undergrads can come in with scores as low as 71 on TOEFL IBT. Grads, I think, is 79, and they go up to scores of 99. If they went beyond that, we don't give them our test. They're exempted from English. The test, there's writing and speaking, or writing and oral communication. I'm only going to talk about oral communication. The construct of that is assessing fluency, grammar and vocabulary, pronunciation, and IC, which is interactional competence. I'm also, for the sake of time, going to focus only on IC, but also because the other things, it seems like they're pretty easy to assess with simpler approaches. It's IC that seems like it's the tough stuff to assess. In our study, all rating is from trained human judges. And in the research I'm going to talk about, it's a fully crossed design with 4 judges and 40 test takers. So the first point, this assures that by using human raters, we assure that the test addresses the ethical concern about including human judgments in assessing complex constructs. So we've met that ethical criteria, as an example of some of the things. So the task, it's a paired discussion in our test. A pair is provided with a discussion prompt, which asks each to take a particular side in an issue and defend that position in a 4-minute discussion. You can see on the left, or at least I think it would be your left. Your left, yep. And you can see the paired discussion between two humans, and on the right you can see the other condition talking to a spoken dialogue system, where there's of course one test taker talking to the system. What are spoken dialogue systems? Well, they're systems capable of orally interacting with a human for aiding and eliciting interactive speech samples. And I'm going to distinguish between two types. One, rule-based spoken dialogue systems. These are systems that detect keywords and phrases and build a response using text transformation and template filling. That's a way of saying that we train it with a small corpus. We take the task, the prompt itself, and see how well or what information is there, what are people going to be saying, and then we pull out keywords and then we prepare responses based on those keywords. That's what we were doing 10 years ago and up until about a few years ago. More recently, we have large language model SDSs. They're systems trained on very large data sets of human language with the aim of using language like a human might to converse. So in this case, you've got gazillions of data out there, oftentimes the entire internet or a big part of it, and you're going to be pulling from what is likely that a person would be saying given this exact thing. That's what the SDS will say given what the human is saying in the conversation. So you have a lot more data to have that conversation. Well, let me talk a little bit about rule-based, because this is where we've done quite a bit of research, and we're just moving into the large language model research now. Rule-based SDS was able to elicit more features of interactional competence than a human partner. So we found that it was able to actually elicit these opportunities. What we know from the research in human-to-human or paired discussions is there's some things that just don't show up in a conversation. Not all conversations. It may be that there's a breakdown in communication and you want to see if someone can repair that, but if that breakdown doesn't occur, how can you rate whether that really happened or not? So our model we included in our model the ability to put some of those cases in there so that students always have the opportunity to show whether they can do that or not. Now, you'll see a lot of information up here, and I'm going to just draw your attention to a couple of things. Across the bottom, you see 12 features of interactional competence, and I'm going to give an example. If you look at the far one to the side, it's recognizing a position, the last one. This would be if the SDS says, I believe, blah, 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 then the human needs to say, oh, I understand your point, and then either agree or disagree, and then carry on that, so recognizing a position. So you've got 12 of these, and what you're seeing in the bars, the human is blue, and the spoken dialogue system is orange. And you can see a comparison when a rater says, is this rateable sample or it's not a rateable sample for these 12 features. So the rater goes through for each feature and says, yes, I can rate that. No, I couldn't. There's no examples. There's nothing there. I'm going to draw your attention to, and on the left side you see a scale from 0 to 60. So 40 samples they rated, and there are 4 raters. And so we took that total there. These 2 examples, and we purposely put these in here. I'm not going to explain both of them, but one of them is responding in a time when. So we modeled in there that the test taker, so that they're trying to clarify meaning. So we put something in there that you couldn't understand. It made no sense. We want to see, is the test taker going to say, oh, I'm sorry, could you explain? I don't know what you mean by whatever that is, which made no sense. So we purposely put that in there because we wanted to see if they could clarify meaning or try to repair this communication breakdown. And you see that this worked pretty well. I'm referring to the one here where The blue line is very small, so that it was in very few of our conversations, but it was in a lot with the spoken dialogue system, so we were able to assess that. And if you look across there, you can see that in general, the SDS did a bit better than the human case. Some other things, and I'm just picking and choosing because I don't have much time today. Spoken dialogue system scores were more dependable. So rule-based SDS, as we found, a 0.85 dependability compared to a 0.73 for the human condition. The human condition, on the other hand, and this was one of the big limitations of the SDS, provided more appropriate response in certain situations, such as answering questions, discussing indirectly related topics, things like that. So there certainly were some limitations to our rule-based SDS as a partner. As far as humanism, or a humanistic question, do we have information about that? Well, what we did was we asked the test takers, would you prefer to take a speaking test with a human or a computer partner? And what we found was it was very much split. Some were saying equal number said human as compared to a computer, and plenty said no preference. And so our thinking was, well, in general, most people are not being upset by talking to a computer. They're just as happy as they are talking to a human. It doesn't mean that they liked either, but one is no worse than the other for most people. Now, finally, I want to talk about what our future research is and what we're doing now. And I always tease my students that I get all the credit, which is what's happening today, and they do all the work. And that's working out pretty well, so that's what's happening. But right now, we're working on a project, and this is In Young's project who's doing this. Build on the advantages of the SDS and mitigate the disadvantages. So we have the older system of the SDS, and we want to bring it up to the current one, and we're focusing on these kinds of questions. Can it provide opportunities for test takers to demonstrate interactional competence features that are sufficient? All aspects of IC are rateable. Standardized, limit interlocutor variability. It's already pretty good at 0.85, but that's with 4 raters. Could we reduce it to 2 raters and still have 0.85, for example? We want to make that better. Increase appropriateness of response to the test taker. That was one of the biggest limitations of the SDS that we were using before, the rule-based one. And increase authenticity and positive washback by including speech varieties with targeted differences. So using a number of different things to help us with fairness and making it more ethical following our standards. And finally, provide a more positive experience for test takers compared to our previous SDS. So can you do something with the interface? Can you make it more humanistic? And this is a screenshot of In Young's what she's going to be doing, the interface. And you can see she's going to talk about the details of this study. I don't want to steal her thunder. So she's presenting tomorrow at 4 if you want to hear how things have been updated and where we're going. My time is up. Anthony hasn't raised his hand, but I'm guessing it's about there. I got 1 minute, so I'm right on track. I want to conclude by saying, when developing language assessments, we need to ensure that they're fair, humanistic, and ethical. How do you want to be remembered by the language assessment community? Where do you want to be? Well, I think I'll stick with being crunchy. So Carol's going to come up and speak now, and I'm going to quickly try to change over to her slides.
Well, thank you, Gary. Thank you for this occasion, this it's an honor to be named in this award, and I just want to also express my real appreciation for this, as well as the opportunity to talk more about issues involved with generative AI in language assessment. This is certainly a topic for our lifetimes, isn't it? What an incredible thing that has occurred when somehow the engineers, the linguists, all the people who have been working on this project of getting a computer to actually produce grammatical language in discourse, and it just is mind-blowing, isn't it? It also has produced many, many new issues for us in language assessment. And I think it's useful to think about these issues in kind of the broader picture of language technologies in language education. The significance of each generation of technology in language education is in not only what the technology can do, but also who has the access and the knowledge to use it. And we can recall a long evolution of one technology after another that has come along. And they all started in research labs, didn't they? Do you remember, some of us are old enough to remember when it was really fun to get an email from somebody. The rest of the world didn't have the technology then. They weren't connected to the internet then. But that has changed, and each technology, each generation moves from research labs to businesses, to some schools, and then to the public. Well, generative AI seemed to jump overnight from research labs into the public, didn't it? And in language testing, we recognized this immediately. There was very, very quick-moving colleagues that put together this wonderful debate at LTRC 2023, where they debated the issues of GenAI exists, it's out there in the public, everybody's using it. What does it mean for language assessment? What should we do with this? And so I really recommend this article that's in Language Assessment Quarterly. That kind of gets you into the issues. But a lot of what they're talking about in this article is the issue of authenticity. It's the issue of what do we do when using GenAI in natural language use is what everybody's doing. That is part of the target language use domain. And there's another article in Language Assessment Quarterly by Xiaoming Shi who picks up this question along with some other ones, framed in terms of what this means for each of the inferences in a validity argument. And in particular, when she's talking about domain definition, again, we're back to the issue of authenticity. She writes, limitations of the spoken dialogue system, and like Gary was talking about, technology, may constrain the types of conversation, writing exchange used, leading to construct underrepresentation or lack of task authenticity. SDS-generated dialogues may lack the kind of diversity and richness of real-world conversations and may sometimes be perceived as too contrived compared to naturally occurring conversations. Okay, the issues of authenticity. So I think we have to ask, though, what are naturally occurring conversations in the world today? Here's an example of one. This is between two humans. One says, and this is text, so this conversation isn't even spoken. I plan to walk to the union sometime this afternoon to attend conference. The weather should be nice. The response is the afternoon conference program. And then the follow-up is, now the weather is indicating thunderstorms by 2:45. Okay. That's an authentic conversation. We use these kind of conversations out in the real world, the target language use situation, all the time. Here's another naturally occurring conversation. This time, there's a human, but the interlocutor is ChatGPT. That's my symbol for ChatGPT. The human makes a request. Please give me 10 sentences, each one containing a different nominalization that is a technical term from a different discipline. ChatGPT provides, it says, here are 10 sentences, each with a nominalization that's a technical term from a different discipline, and then lists the 10. Doesn't fit on the screen, but they were all there. There were 10. They were all different disciplines. They were all nominalizations. And the response is, good. For the next set, please include only nominalizations ending in tion and place them in different positions in the example sentences, not always in the beginning. The conversation continued. You know these conversations can get quite long. So this is, again, a naturally occurring conversation. So I think we really need to look at, and this is what our generative AI research group at Iowa State has been doing, looking at the purposes for conversations with ChatGPT. And we found, I mean, we're just getting going on this, but we found one study that gave kind of an overview of some of the purposes that were found in a survey, and those were for productivity. The example I just showed was an example of productivity because the request was made to get information that was going to be used for teaching. So productivity, novelties. Novelty is like, what does it know? What can it really do? Fun, creativity, producing novel, interesting, combining things in different ways, information, learning, social, friend, you'd be my friend, I'm lonesome, and advice for life. So I have listed here the number of instances that came from this survey. And then the X's there indicate the categories, and which is all of them, the categories that we also have examples from in our research group. We put all of we put our conversations together and found that, yeah, I mean, we do all these things with ChatGPT. So anyway, this is a start, but these kinds of questions, just the fact that these are going on is not enough. That doesn't make a direct link to language assessment, although it is quite relevant. What we really need to be doing as part of our authenticity studies is looking at these questions. How is generative AI involved in the conversations that language users engage in? How can these conversations be described? How important are conversations with generative AI as communicative events for language users' lives? And how relevant are these conversations for defining the test taker abilities of interest to test users? Okay, so that kind of takes the descriptive work into language assessment. Let's move to another issue. Rating test takers' essays for placement decisions. Okay, on this topic, we know that in higher education and business, trusted language testing providers have used automated writing evaluation for years. Okay, automated writing evaluation, AWE, I'm going to call it. There have been books written on this topic. One very well-known one is The Handbook by Shermis and Bernstein. In language assessment research, we have seen many research reports of success in building algorithms and training systems that predict human ratings well. And these are just a couple of very frequently quoted references are the ones by Attali and Bernstein. They found machine scores have perfect iterator reliability. You give the same essays to the same algorithm, and it will produce the same results again and again. Another frequently quoted one, human raters and e-raters show a high degree of agreement about the score an essay should receive. Okay, these are good results. These are kind of background knowledge for people working in ELT now. People working in ELT knows that things are rated by machine. But the access to and knowledge of automated writing evaluation technologies started in research and moved to business, but they're not widely available for local testing programs to use in routine placement testing. They've been out of reach. Nevertheless, we now have generative AI. And when generative AI arrived, professionals responsible for placement decisions based on students' written essays were hanging around wishing they could get the results out faster, wishing they could get more reliable ratings. But in November 2022, ChatGPT came along, and oh boy, our problems are solved. ChatGPT can do it. ChatGPT appeared to be able to do anything, didn't it? I don't know about the rest of you, but I heard people just wandering the halls with, thrilled over what they had found, what they had discovered. It was absolutely amazing. Well, it is absolutely amazing. And it appeared to have all sorts of implications. It was as if the years of research and study of automated writing evaluation in research labs and in businesses had suddenly come knocking on the door of our university ESL programs, right? I mean, it was just so exciting. But there are some issues. And some of these have been described very nicely in some of the papers yesterday, some really interesting studies. Okay, so one issue is that the AWE in high-stakes testing has been developed over years and is monitored for continued refinement. It's an ongoing project. ChatGPT and local placement testing can extend beyond the professionals who know how to investigate the results. So, and we saw the session, especially Rez's session yesterday, where he was looking at comparing ChatGPT and human ratings. It's incredibly complicated. Algorithms used in automated scoring produce consistent results. GenAI uses large language models to produce novel results. You give the same essays to the same GenAI again and again and again, and you don't get the same responses. You don't get the same results each time. So that's a little detail that's different. Automated scoring can be built to reach agreement with trained human raters. GenAI may be trained to agree with raters, but many factors affect the success. Okay, and so we're starting to see this. We're starting to see this in the research a lot. There's one example of a study that was done by students in our GenAI research group that appears in this volume, Exploring AI in Applied Linguistics. And this is an open publication, QR code. But this is one of the early explorations of AI used for writing placement. Okay, so let's go on to our third issue. How are we doing on time, Nancy?
We're doing good.
Okay. All right. So the third issue is feedback on students' written assignments. And again, here we've seen this topic in a number of sessions so far in the conference. Okay, so our students write their papers. They work with AWE feedback, which may be GenAI or maybe Grammarly. Our students have been using Grammarly for some time. They write their papers, they work hard on them, and they ultimately produce a text which gets submitted to their teacher. The teacher's job then is to provide some feedback on the student's text. But now teachers have access to ChatGPT, etc., the other tools. And so some teachers are thinking, ChatGPT can give more detailed feedback faster than I can. Well, that provides an interesting situation, doesn't it? There was another study that was done that's also in this open book. There was a study that took a little closer look at that very interesting situation. A paper by Xu looked at EFL school teachers' AI assessment literacy by exploring what they actually do in this situation. He found teachers in schools were using ChatGPT feedback, and so he studied teachers' use of, this was in China, and they didn't have ChatGPT in China, or maybe still don't, but they had ErnieBot. ErnieBot was the Chinese ChatGPT, to my way of thinking. So he interviewed teachers just to find out what they were doing with GenAI feedback. And one teacher reports, I put all of the students' written assignments in one Word file and uploaded it to the tool. I typed in my instruction in English, not in Chinese, as I feel it works better, as the instruction is given in the same language as that of the data. Another teacher, I often specify the purpose for the bot. I also use a couple of texts to try to see if it fully understands the purpose before I ask it to provide feedback for more texts. If it understands well enough, it will give feedback that is relevant to the purpose. If not, its feedback will focus on other issues. Okay, so these teachers had their various procedures and strategies, etc. But you have to kind of wonder, and this wasn't in the study, this wasn't reported, you have to wonder, what kind of feedback did the students actually end up with when the teacher is getting the feedback from ErnieBot in this case? Now, again, you know how these conversations with ChatGPT, with the GenAI can go. And just to give an example, though, I have some feedback that I got from a short text that I wrote. It was about 500 words that I wrote in French. My writing in French is probably about an intermediate low, okay? And I got a score of 4 out of 6, which I thought was pretty good. And I got feedback. I got feedback about the content and language use and organization. And I got some specific corrections about grammar. I got suggestions for improvement. I got specific errors and explanations, and more of those, and more down to the list where I had 26. So this is an example of the kind of feedback. I mean, I'm an intermediate low. I'm guessing that I'm not all that different from those students in China who were in those classes writing in English, right? So what kind of feedback is this teacher actually giving to the students when the GenAI can give so much feedback? Now the teacher was interested in the feedback because it's detailed and faster. But in language assessment, we've worked on this topic of feedback for some time, and this is from a chapter in a book on language, learning-oriented assessment, and it kind of summarizes what some of the values are that we would have for giving feedback. And there are things like directs learners' attention to specific aspects, helps the learners identify gaps, offers appropriate level, helps them understand the criteria, engages. There are some important criteria here that we tend to think about in terms of what feedback should be. So, I mean, I detect a gap here, right? So the teacher's there thinking, I'm going to get it fast and detailed. And we're thinking, well, let's think about what the student really needs and what the feedback is trying to do. So, I mean, this really comes back to language assessment literacy, right? But it adds an additional component, and that is technological language assessment literacy. And those of us, again, from our research group, we know that this is quite parallel to what we think about for technology-mediated language learning in teacher education. We talk about technological, pedagogical language knowledge that teachers need. So we would like the teacher to be thinking, how can I use feedback from ChatGPT to help students? So this is a topic that, another topic for us to research, I think. And at this point, I can invite people. I'll give a little advertisement for our conference and invite everybody to join us in working on these kinds of issues. Our conference each year, Technology for Second Language Learning, is an opportunity to combine our study of generative AI in applied linguistics, covering both assessment and learning. And the call for papers is out. The deadline is April 22nd, so I invite anybody who might be interested in joining to do so. It's a hybrid conference, so wherever you are welcome to join, whether you're participating by presenting or not. So I think that we'll leave it there, and I guess I'm a little bit early, which is good because I'm sure that everybody here has some interesting things to share on this topic. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we have time for discussion.
Good morning, and thank you for such a great talk. I think my first question would be, my question would be for Carol. In the study group or research group, what have the discussions been on what still keeps to be special about the human teacher given feedback? Because with so many advantages of AI being faster and being more detailed, why should a learner still reach out to a human to ask for feedback on their writing or speaking? What has remained something that AI cannot do or cannot do yet?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that AI can't do. We need to talk about a particular situation, though, I think, right? I think in general, AI cannot be a person who reads something that another person wrote. So I guess that would be the general answer there, yeah. But I think this idea of technological language assessment literacy really needs to dig into questions like that, to look at the kinds of feedback that are really good and appropriate at a given time. I think the guidelines we have from all this work in classroom assessment comes from face-to-face teaching, et cetera. And so, I mean, one way of approaching it would be to look at, take some of these criteria that have been developed in the field and look at a particular, you have to look at a particular setting and learner and learning scenario. Different levels of learners have different needs. I really like the kind of feedback I get from ChatGPT, but I'm pretty smart about what I mean. So so that's going to be different for somebody else at a different level or with a different level of metacognitive awareness of what they need for their own learning, their purposes in learning. I mean, it's all complex, right? And so fortunate for us in our field, more research is needed. Oh, yes, sorry.
Let me just say, I'd add to that teachers know a lot about students. They know how much they can take, what they need, all those things. And if you took the time to feed all of that information into ChatGPT that a teacher knows, it would probably take you longer than have the teacher just do the feedback in the first place. The teachers know so much about students in in a good learning environment, that they can get the kind of feedback the student's ready for. They're not getting too much, they're not getting too little. I think there's a lot of things that without having done a lot of research, we can predict. Those are the things that ChatGPT can't do unless you want to spend 3 hours or more putting that kind of information into ChatGPT.
But no matter how much information ChatGPT has, it's not going to be human. Right, Shebna?
Yes.
Okay.
Gary and Carol, thank you for really interesting talks. I hate getting up early in the morning, but this was worth it. So thank you. So I have a question for you, Gary, about the different features of interactional competence that you had. And I'm wondering if where you got those features from. Are you happy with the taxonomy of features that you have? So that's my first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, in the topical domain in which you have them, interacting, are there opportunities for implied meanings or implied pragmatic meanings? And if so, do you have features that can tap into that, as opposed to some of the very transactional stuff that you get that's low-hanging fruit, easier to get? So I'm curious.
Yeah, first off, I have the scale and I can show it to you later, but pragmatics is a very important part of it. So it says do these things pragmatically, appropriately, etc. So that is a very important part of our interactional scale. The way I see interactional, and the way we see it, I think, and I've talked to a number of other people, interactional competence is kind of a bigger umbrella which includes pragmatic competence. That's the way we view it. That kind of answers the last part. The first part, which is, did you want me to talk about each of the subscales or just the interactional? Where did we get those 12?
Is it your taxonomy? Is it someone else's taxonomy?
So the 12 pieces came from, so one of our students did research on this, Song Chapelle, and her dissertation went back to a lot of different things. Like there's a study, I believe, trying to remember the name right now, Song can probably answer the question, but it goes back about 20 years where we're starting to look at all of the pieces that we would have and what are important in interacting. And those things went together, and then it's based on further research that included confirmatory factor analysis to try to build all of these things together. So it's based on a large body of research. And then we ended up with something like 20, and we tried to blend a few of those down because you're asking raters to rate 12 things was about all we could do. But yeah, this is based on a lot of research going back and looking at communicative language syllabi and trying to figure out what are these things. And then again, Songka's dissertation tries to pull those together into the features that we have. So we largely followed the results of that. Barry O'Sullivan, that's the research that comes out in 2002 that we started with. That was kind of our starting place.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your wonderful talks. My name is So Young, and I'm the first year PhD student at Georgia State University. And regarding the feedback from ChatGPT, well, I have a teacher experience background, so I know how difficult for teachers to give feedback on students' writings. And it seems to me that ChatGPT generative AI assessment has been done a lot of work on linguistic accuracy, giving feedback on linguistic accuracy. But for teachers, it takes a lot of time to give feedback on students' content. Like, for example, if they write an argumentative essay, then how students can build their argument with appropriate supporting details. So my question is, how do you see in the future that ChatGPT can provide content feedback in argumentative writings? And do you think that ChatGPT or generative AI can actually give contextual feedback in writings? And what kind of research should be done to achieve those goals? If that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, in my experience, in my limited experience in working with the feedback, ChatGPT is happy to give feedback on content, organization, style, expand content. Okay, here it gets into the errors. ChatGPT really connects with content. In fact, the corpus linguistics work that is done, corpus linguists find that the generative AI isn't very good at talking about language at all. So they would disagree with you. But I mean, there are just so many specific cases that we need to be looking at as applied linguists. I mean, this is our job as applied linguists. Look at the detail of the language. Look at what's provided for feedback. And I mean, expanding content, add more specific examples and evidence to support claims about Trudeau's political achievements and criticisms. I mean, that is really specific content feedback. There's more of this. I didn't show all the feedback that I got from ChatGPT here, but there's another whole other section of feedback where it actually goes and gets the specific details that are needed that would develop that argument better. I mean, so I think the capabilities there are just extraordinary. This is and there's the ChatGPT that just sits on your desk and is there and says hi, you know, when you first start. But then you can also configure tools that will do specific things. You can feed it information about the specific assignment that you've given the student. And it will provide lots of different kinds of feedback. So I think the potential there is just enormous. It's too big, actually. You know, it's too much. And so how do you decide? How do you you know, feeding it all the information about the student is kind of overkill because you need to decide what kind of feedback you want to give. Is the student ready for the 6 pages of feedback that I showed here? And if not, what kind? And how do you sort that out? I mean, those are things that you can build into a customized GPT for your students. So there's plenty. You said you're a first-year PhD student. Yes. You are at the right place at the right time.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I mean, very great times, and innovation and technology creates a lot of opportunities for research and practice at the same time. I just want to refer to your point, Dr. Chapelle, about different configurations that you can do with large language models. And there's certainly a lot more to that. I have seen more than one paper sent to me to review that they use large language models and they don't even implement the most basic thing in large language model, like temperature. When you are rating, you want consistency, but you just go by default, and every time you get a different score or interpretation. Also, there are many different ways of using large language models. As you said, you can give it a specific assignment, but there's also more to that. You can have few-shot learning, which means, for example, you can give your student assignment and a history of your own feedback to that student as examples, and a large language model can learn to give the same type of feedback to students, so you don't have to worry about limiting or giving too many instructions. So coming to the point, who do you think should be responsible for AI literacy? Because for many years we've been grappling with this assessment literacy, and now we have a new aspect to it, which is the AI literacy. Thank you.
Well, I think that we who are teaching and learning in graduate programs are definitely responsible. And then also in-service programs, in workplace programs. I think there's responsibility that goes all around.
Do we want to stop?
I think I'm good with what Carol said. I don't want to add to that, but I think we probably want to stop. So thank you so much for your questions.
Thank you.